And we are good. Okay, terrific. Well, thank you. So first off, I just want to thank YAF and the University of Redlands for having me. These days, it is always a pleasure when I get to speak with students without experiencing some sort of shutdown or riot in the process.
Absolutely.
I did read the very kind letter in the Redlands Bulldog concerning my visit, and I'd actually like to start off there. According to the newspaper, quote, as a conservative commentator, Shapiro has made comments considered offensive to some people, specifically toward the LGBTQ community, women, and ethnic minorities. So here's my perspective. If you're offended by the opinions I express, that's obviously your right, that's obviously your prerogative. If you're offended by the facts that I state, you need to change your view of the world. Facts do not care about your view.
Yes. Facts don't offend.
Now, I was a little disappointed that I didn't receive a personalized invitation to the asterisk, all capital letters, deliberated event. My presence there would threaten the safe space that they've created for themselves. I'm obviously a very dangerous individual, very threatening and scary.
Very threatening.
And I was looking forward to busting a few moves in the dance party of resistance. I know that I feel the resistance every time I see the students dancing. I do have one recommendation for their playlist. It's also a recommendation for life from, of course, that great artist of our times, Rihanna. They should stop complaining and work, 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 work. All right, so jump right in. I want to start talking about intersectionality because that's the philosophy that now dominates so many campuses. And the philosophy of intersectionality is really a stupid one and a damaging one. It basically suggests that what you have to say about life is unimportant. Who you are is important. Your identity matters more than the words coming out of your mouth or the activities in which you engage. So here's the fact. Intersectionality is a bunch of nonsense, and the rankings that they set up of particular human beings are just as silly. The way that it works in intersectionality is the bigger the victim you are, the bigger the virtue you have created for yourself. So the hierarchy goes something like this. LGBTQ people at the very top, and then black people, and then Hispanic people, and then female people, and then Asian people way down here, and then Jewish people even lower than that. And then finally, at the very bottom, the evil people in this hierarchy of intersectionality are the straight white males. And I mean, I like people from all these groups, so we can cheer all of these groups. It doesn't just have to be straight white males that get cheered. They're the ones who get booed, so I suppose that's fair. But here's the way intersectionality works. Because identity matters more than what people actually say or think, if you found one person who embodied all of these minority identities in one, you would fix all of life's problems. Just make this person the dictator, you couldn't argue with them. Because the way that works, if you're on the lower level of intersectionality, you can't argue with anyone on the upper level of intersectionality. If you're a straight white male, you can't argue with anybody. If you're a Jew, you can argue with a straight white male, but not with an Asian. If you're an Asian, you're allowed to argue with a woman, but you're definitely not allowed to argue with a black person. And if you're LGBTQ, you can argue with anybody. Right? But if we somehow find, just somehow, the unicorn of intersectionality, and I'm talking right now about a bisexual, transgender, female, little person, who's 3/4 black, 1/4 Native American in the city. If we find that person, we can all just go home, because no conversation would be able to be, that person would be able to win every conversation. She would just walk into the room and that would be the end of it. The problem with all of this is, of course, it creates not white privilege or black, but it creates victim privilege. And this is what has become so prevalent on America's college campuses. And the idea that if you're a victim, you get privileges that are associated. And those privileges really boil down to two. First, you're the only person who gets to talk. And second, you actually get to hurt people. If you take it to its logical extreme, you actually get to engage in violence. And we've seen that. We've seen the riots in Berkeley. We've seen riots in California State, Los Angeles, where I spoke last February. You saw people like me being banned from DePaul. You're allowed to use the levers of power in order to ban people who are lower than you are on the victim scale. If you're very high on the victim scale, then you get to shut people up and shut people down. So that means at this university, you get to ban a funeral for Halloween. Because we wouldn't want to offend anybody, causing, emotional and psychological harm. So they said that they don't want anyone causing emotional and psychological harm. Now God knows that our servicemen and women coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan have experienced some pretty rough things, but they've never had to go through anything quite as horrible as a funeral for Halloween. I do love that the poster in favor of the funeral for Halloween. What it said was, Halloween was murdered in cold blood by political correctness. A suspect also charged with the death of Cinco de Mayo, Harambe meetings, stand-up comedy, and a variety of hilariously themed college parties. It turns out that the app actually had the wrong suspect. It wasn't political correctness. It was, to be exact, Assistant Director of Student Activities, Dan Murphy. If you see her stand up and take a bow, Dan. But I want to talk about why it is in America, the greatest country in the history of mankind, you're not a victim. Because the truth is that the only person who can victimize you in America is you. Nobody cares about you. Understand something. Your parents care about you. If you're married, you have a girlfriend or boyfriend, maybe they care about you, maybe not. Depends on the longevity of your marriage, your relationship. If you have a child, they care about you until they turn 18. But the fact is that virtually no one cares enough about you to stop you. No one is attempting to stop you. No one cares about you. So you're not a victim. The only people who can victimize you are people who care about you enough to try and stop you from doing the things that you want to do. So let's talk about all of these victim groups in the intersectional hierarchy here and why they're not actually victims in the United States. So, if you're black, you're not a victim in the United States. I understand that the concept of white privilege means that you think, if you are on the left campus, you've been taught that if you're a black person, you are inherently going to be victimized in the United States. This is not true. Now, it is true that there has been historic racism in the United States, of course. Anyone who denies that is an idiot or an ignorant. It is also true that there are people who are living now who are experiencing the after effects of historic discrimination. Right? If your dad wasn't able to get a job in 1960, that has an impact on you not being able to go to a better school or afford a better lifestyle. Now, that's obviously true. That's obviously true. But here's the thing. In the United States, in any case, we can't solve your situation at birth. We can't solve it. Only you can solve it. And we especially can't solve it if we mean that we're going to now engage in some sort of injustice against someone else in order to rectify the cosmic injustice that you were born poor. Because we're all born in different circumstances, right? We're born rich, we're born poor, we're born tall, we're born Jewish, right? We're all born in different circumstances. And the fact is, we can't rectify that imbalance through government action or social pushes. Right? It wouldn't be a good NBA if they could force me into the NBA just because there aren't a lot of Jews in the NBA. That would be stupid. It would make for some really bad competition. The fact is that if you want a fair system, the rules have to apply to everyone. Right. And it can't just be, I'm going to steal from one group to apply to the other group because in the past, that group is stolen from the other group. We can't do that because you're actually not stealing from the same people. Right? You're not actually victimizing the people who are the victimizers. You're not victimizing the segregationists now. You're victimizing people who are their grandchildren who think their grandparents were jerks. And here's the other thing. If you're black, you're actually not a victim under the current rules. Right now, according to Brookings Institution, which is a left-leaning institution, you only have to do 3 things if you don't want to be permanently poor in the United States. And you're all capable of doing these things. 1, graduate high school. 2nd, don't have babies before you get married. And 3rd, get and hold a job. That's it. You do these 3 things, you will not be permanently poor in the United States. And you're all capable of this. And you're on a campus, so you already graduated high school. I'm sure that you're all capable of holding a job of some sort or another. Most of you. And I'm certain that you're all capable of not putting that thing there without that other thing on it.
Hey, you have no room to talk.
2% of Americans who follow these 3 rules are in poverty right now. 75% of people born in poverty who follow these 3 rules are now in the middle class.
There you go.
There's 71% of poor families with children are unmarried. Right? Again, you break that rule, you're going to be poor. Or at least there's a better shot that you're going to be poor. The poverty rate among non-married white families was 22% as of 2008. The poverty rate among married black families was 7% that same year. What happened to the white privilege? Well, some people followed the rules and some people didn't. It was about who followed the rules and who didn't. It wasn't about the skin color. Right? The white single mom is not better off than a black married family. So it ain't about race, it's about behavior. By the way, if we're going to talk about income and disparities in income and how the system must have been designed for the privilege of white males, then you have to answer one question. Why is it that the highest single earning group in the United States isn't white males, isn't white people at all, it's Asians? Was the Constitution written solely for the benefit of Asians? Was the Constitution written in Korean? As far as the idea that black people in the United States are victimized by our crime policy, this is also untrue. There's a very simple solution if you don't want to go to jail. And it's really, don't do it. Right? Don't commit crime. It's very simple. The number of people who are in prison because they're innocent is almost 0. Felonies are under-prosecuted in the black community. Police are less likely to kill black people than white people in similar circumstances. In 2015, the cops shot 987 people. A huge majority of those people were armed or threatening deadly force. Blacks represented 26% of those shot. That sounds disproportionate, except for the fact that nearly 50% of all murders in the United States are committed by people who are black, which is not a racist argument. That is a fact. Okay, and the fact is that if you don't want to go to jail for murder, you probably shouldn't kill anyone. Police officers are 18.5 times more likely to be shot by a black male than an unarmed black male is likely to be killed by the police. And as for all the stuff they teach on campuses like this that they make you take in your sociology course, the most useless courses ever devised by man, they make you take implicit bias. So you go home, you sit by your computer, and then you click a little button that tells you if you're a racist or not, because it puts a word up next to a picture of a black person. It's a bad word, you're going to click faster if you're a racist. These are a load of crap. Even the people who designed them understand that they have no correlation with real-world activity. They're not applicable, so you can't actually take the same test twice and get the same result. They just don't work. Okay? And so when we get to that test, understand that it's really a load. It doesn't work at all. Okay, how about the idea that if you're a woman, that you're at some sort of inherent disadvantage here in the United States? No, you're not. You're living in the freest, best place on earth in history for women at any time.
Right.
That deserves an applause.
Discrimination against women. God made the discrimination that women are the ones who have to have babies. He also made the discrimination that the baby in a womb is not actually your baby. So the baby actually has something else going on that has nothing to do with you. When people want to preserve the baby, that's not because they care about your body, it's because they care about the baby.
Thank you. Hello.
Right-wing, pro-life men really wanted to control your body. Do you really think that they would start with your uterus? This idea that women are somehow victims in the United States of this horrible discrimination, this glass ceiling that hovers over them at all times, that only Hillary Clinton's face can break, right?
She could break a lot of other things.
147 out of 150 of the biggest cities in the United States, women make 8% more than men if they are single and unmarried and have the same degrees.
Wow.
More than men.
Well, so much for that wage gap.
55% of all people in colleges are women. That gap is getting larger, not smaller. 58% of all graduate degrees in the United States
Going to women.
How about rape culture? This idea that there's this vast bevy of rapists, especially happening on campuses. 1 in 4 women has been sexually assaulted in all this. Absolute crap. It is a made-up statistic based on a self-selected survey in which everything from an unsolicited kiss to actual rape is counted as a sexual assault. The actual statistic on the number of people who are raped in college from the Bureau of Justice Statistics from 1995 to 2002 on campus was 6 per 1,000 in the population. You may notice that 6 is a little lower than 250 of 1,000 in the population. By the way, this is also true of Redlands. Okay, so Redlands, I understand, has had some instances of rape. From 2011 to 2015, there were 31 reported forcible sex offenses here, including 16 alleged rapes. Now, it is worthwhile noting that virtually none of these were prosecuted because the victims, or the alleged victims, didn't actually go to the cops or weren't willing to name their accusers. And, I understand that there are a lot of difficulties with women who have been raped, but can I please suggest that people against whom crimes are committed should please go report these to the police so that we can put rapists in prison as fast as possible. In 2015, there were 4 forcible sex offenses and 3 rapes. None were actually reported to the police. All 3 alleged victims refused to identify their assailants. Okay, all that is to say, it's not to minimize rape in any way. Each one of these is a horrific incident. Again, please go to the police if something like this happens. We're all on your side. No one wants to see women raped. I want to see them jailed, castrated, or killed. Okay, if people So let's talk about the staff for 1 second. There are about 5,000 students on this campus, I understand. That means that the rape statistic here is actually lower than the BJS statistic. Right? For every 1,000 students on the campus, less than 1 is being raped. It's not 250 out of thousands. This idea that this gas rape epidemic is just not true, statistically speaking. Let me also recommend that a bad way to fight sexual assault and sexism is this free the nipple nonsense. So I get that you guys have been having some free the nipple events around here, which I'm sure your parents are just deeply proud of.
Oh, brother.
You show your parents pictures of you topless on a campus with lots of lots of other young adults, and they just think to themselves, boy, I am spending this tuition money extraordinarily wisely. I have to say, I do love the description from the Redlands Bulldog of the Free the Nipple event from November 2015. At 12:35 p.m., the line of students gave each other looks of excitement and nodded their heads. In unison, they stripped their shirts off, proudly exposing their breasts for everyone to see. Dead silence followed. Well, dead silence except for the thousands of pairs of male shoes pattering directly to the Free the Nipple event. I guess they say the purpose of these events is to eliminate the sexualization of breasts. I tried this one on my wife. I absolutely did not want it. Honey, can you please take off your shirt? I'm trying to eliminate the sexualization of your breasts. Good luck with that, feminists. Meanwhile, by the way, precisely the people the feminists decry, the sexists decry, and the people who are out there that only see women as a collection of genitalia and secondary sex characteristics, they're pretty happy, it turns out, to be walking around with their face cupped and their boobs out. Okay, note to the feminists in the room. I'm sorry if it's hurt your feeling. Men generally like boobies. Yeah, loud cheer from the and it turns out that this is largely true across cultures, across time periods. Go back and read Song of Songs. It's a natural biblical book in which it describes the wonders of breasts.
That's true. Is that?
Because from an anthropological perspective, breasts are secondary sex characteristics. They signal to men that you are now fertile. Okay, which is why there's interest in breasts among some of the primate species, like bonobos. Men respond biologically. So I'm sorry that reality means that you should wear a shirt if you don't want men staring at your chest. I'm sorry. Get over it. And if you're struggling for a female equality announcement stripping down to somehow shame the male gaze, like, figure that you can probably find some supporters in this room. Finally, if you're an LGBT person in America, you're an LGBTQ RSV person in America, you are not a victim in the United States. Women and lesbian couples make far more money than women and straight couples. Men and gay couples make slightly less than men and gay couples make slightly less than men and straight couples, but if both partners are working, they make significantly more. Same-sex couples with both partners in the workforce make $8,000 more per year than straight couples, and they are typically higher educated by a pretty wide margin, actually. Now, it is also the time, this is where people say, yes, but there's victimization because of discrimination, and there's victimization because people say mean things. Okay, no one's in favor of saying mean things, but I would just point one thing out. Okay, if you disagree with somebody about a political issue, this does not make it mean. It means you have a difference of opinion. And it is also not violent. So I know that in November of 2015, Laverne Cox came here, and he said, because Laverne Cox is a biological man, Laverne Cox said that misgendering is wrong. He said misgendering a trans person is not an act of violence. So misgendering a trans person is an act of violence, according to Laverne Cox. I have a very simple thought experiment as to whether this is true or not. A minute ago, I quote-unquote misgendered Laverne Cox. Did Laverne Cox fall down? No, it turns out Laverne Cox did not fall down. It turns out that it didn't affect Laverne Cox in any way. It turns out that Laverne Cox is an extraordinarily wealthy individual. Very successful, leading whatever life this person seeks to lead in the United States. Because guess what? Words are not violence. And just because we disagree does not mean that you are my victim. It might just mean that we disagree. Violence is violence. When you conflate these two things, it actually gets into really dangerous territory.
That's right.
Finally, in the United States, you are not a victim if you are poor, because most people at some point in the United States are poor. The fact is there's a lot of income mobility in the United States. Nobody rich in the United States is victimizing you. If you're poor, maybe it's because you've had some bad circumstances, but if you're permanently poor, it's probably because you've made some bad decisions. Truly. The upper middle class in the United States is growing, not shrinking. The middle class isn't disappearing, it's turning into the upper middle class. The upper middle class was 12% of Americans in 1979. It's 30% as of 2014. American income mobility, you keep hearing that nobody can move. If you're stuck at the bottom rung of American society, you can't move up. It's just not true. Our income mobility is exactly the same as European countries with far more redistribution, so long as you follow simple, basic behavioral rules. Income mobility declines, it turns out, you have things out of wedlock. According to Pew Research, your real privilege is to live here. 9 in 10 Americans have a standard of living that is above the global middle income standard. 7% of people in the United States are middle income by the global income standard. That means only 5% of Americans are either low income or actually poor by global income standards. You are so lucky to live in the United States.
That's right.
It's not because you're a better person, it's because you live in the greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
complaining about discrimination without actual evidence of discrimination only makes the problem worse. The reason I say this is because I want your life to be better. So I don't care enough to actually do anything about it, but I also don't care enough to actually get in your way. I want your life to be better. You know who can make your life better? You. And the worst thing that can happen to you is if you inculcate the feeling, if you believe, if you internalize the feeling that you are a victim in American society, you're not going anywhere. If you believe that you're a victim and no matter how hard you work, you are stuck. If you believe that somebody else is going to put on your throat and finish you, you are going to end up on the ground with no one standing over you except you. It's going to be your own fault. The only way for you to be successful in a free country is to take advantage of your freedom and make good decisions that benefit you and your family. Be a good person and make good decisions. Don't worry about shadowy forces in the universe seeking to get you, because they don't exist. They don't. You are the only person standing between you and your success if you work hard.
That's right.
But we're not all going to end up in the same place when all is said and done economically. It doesn't mean that we're all going to be equally successful or equally happy, but it does mean that if your life is in your hands in a free country, you should be blessing your lucky stars for that, as opposed to looking a gift horse in the mouth, going to a beautiful university like this, paying thousands of dollars for tuition, and then turning around and saying, this country is so awful, look what it's done to me, and people like me, or people that I have victimized when you've never done anything to anybody. Wake up. America is a safe space. America is the freest country in the history of the world. Questions now, but the rule here is that if you're somebody who disagrees with me, you go first.